Hello, everyone. I'm Sam Eckmann of Gold Derby here with some of the amazing team behind Ahsoka. We have creator and executive producer Dave Filoni and actors Rosario Dawson and Hayden Christensen. Thank you all for being here. Dave, Ahsoka feels like when we meet her at the start of this series, she's on kind of a lonely path. She's kind of forsaken the Jedi Order, but she has attachments to sort of this old way of living still. What was the most dramatically compelling reason for you to say, okay, this is where we're starting the story?
I think, the idea of starting the character feeling alone is just a very relatable moment, and it makes her more of a mystery at the beginning to see her more like this wandering Ronin. I mean, honestly, in a very selfish way, as a kid, I'd always imagined the Jedi as these wandering samurai, and I just wanted that image of her walking up these stairs in this ancient temple as a way to introduce her and to show that she doesn't have any real structure around her. She's just kind of doing good where she can find it. And then you wonder why. Why is this person alone? And we kind of get into that and begin to understand the backstory to her a bit, who her master was, who her apprentice was. And it's a bit reminiscent to me, I guess, of how I met Obi-Wan. He's by himself living out in the middle of nowhere. She's a bit more active, traveling from place to place, but the wandering wizard warrior archetype was kind of something that I wanted to really get into. Uh, and it's just super fun. It's just the images I like too. A lot of it just comes down to that. They're just these really strong images that I forever believed were part of Star Wars. And I'm glad we could finally commit to that.
I feel like
Yeah.
I got to give a little love out to Hu Yang and our beloved
Food,
David
yeah.
Tennant.
Oh,
You know,
because you're not alone.
I'm
Yeah.
not alone. And also because particularly much like Anakin, she has such a strong relationship to R2D2 and to
Mhm.
Chopper later and then on to Hu Yang. And I think that's one of my favorite things about Star Wars is that these droids are part of the family, part of the team.
Mhm.
But you can see that from the get, even if she's not fully alone and she's working with him, she is because he leaves her hanging on a regular basis and he's so ancient. There's such an interesting age difference between the two of them, I think. You can see how maybe as stoic as she is, how happy she is to kind of have warm-blooded beings and friends to kind of collaborate with again and reunite with.
I think you're
Mhm.
leaning into that relationship. I think he's like, it's fine. But I think if he like did his own thing, he'd be fine with that too. And be
He
like,
totally
cool,
would. I love
it's a
Hu
little
Yang
less
though.
noisy now that
I
she's not.
literally have a video being like, I love you, Hu Yang, and he literally just tries to turn my phone off.
Right. You really?
I'm gonna have to post that after this.
That
This
is,
is
yeah,
great.
post it.
uh, Rosario, Ahsoka's an interesting character because she's not one to sort of launch into a big monologue. You have to do a lot with just expressing with your face, with your physicality. How do you calibrate your performance when you don't have dialogue to help you?
Um, Honestly, I think that's some of my favorite stuff. That was Dave will actually tell you there's a couple times where I had a line and I'd be like, do you mind if I didn't say it actually? And because I think that she has such a robust internal world. And I like the idea that sometimes that there's a little bit of a mystery about where she's at. And to get that opportunity and that sort of solemnity to be able to just kind of emote. And I think that's the thing that you get so beautifully in especially a show. You're going to be intimately in people's homes, or that's where they're playing it. Some people put it on a big screen, but I think pondering and taking those breaths and those times is actually what kind of grounds a scene, and not like having too much exposition and kind of telling people what to think and feel, but to actually feel it, and let them be stirred. I think that's sometimes some of my most favorite moments is those quiet parts. So I love that about her. Obviously, I'm a very verbose word salad kind of person, but I love being so contained. I love that you're kind of meeting her in this place where she isn't sort of that like jumpy, hyper expressive young person anymore. She's become more stoic and she's kind of become a bit more reserved. And it gives us a place to go to with her that she's still developing and maturing and evolving as a person, as brilliant and capable. she an expert she is and disciplined she is, there's still some place for her to grow. And I think that is about opening herself up more and connecting with other people more and sharing. And I think she's not fully there when you meet her, at this stage in her life. That's some place for her to kind of achieve.
Yeah. Hayden, you've lived with Anakin, aka Darth Vader, for quite a long time. It's really nice to see you in this series reuniting with Ahsoka. But I'm curious, stepping into the series now and into this character's shoes now, did you discover anything new about the character? How does it feel playing him now versus when you did in the original trilogy?
Yeah, well, I think that was what was so sort of exciting about it for me, was that there was a newness to what we were doing. And most of that has to do with the relationship that we were exploring. And the way that that affects Anakin, and also, the environment that you see these characters in. It just sort of allowed for us to maybe take some different creative choices and play a little bit more and present a side of this character that was a version that I always kind of wanted to tap into a little bit more, which is, sort of the more sort of confident and wise version of Anakin. And the way Dave had conceived of this whole thing, I thought was so exciting, and smart and clever, and the first time he told me about it, I was just over the moon, with what his vision was. And then reading the script for the first time, I remember texting you like halfway through the script, just being like, thank you, thank you, thank you, because I thought it was just brilliant. And so just to get to come back, playing Star Wars a little bit more, and put a slightly different slant on the character, was really rewarding for me.
Hmm. It's a really compelling sequence when they do face off and meet each other in that episode 5, because there is so much history, and yet for you two, you weren't voicing these characters throughout their huge amount of history in the animated series. So how did you have to come into that moment and give it all of the weight and history that is packed into there?
Yeah, it was a little daunting because it is so well defined, and the work that they did in Clone Wars, and of course, watching, the Clone Wars, you really start to care for that relationship, and you want to honor that relationship. So there were definitely some nerves that first day, but because we do have our own sort of history ourselves, and we've known each other since we were kids, I think we kind of, had a leg up there, and it just sort of made that work a little bit easier, and we could sort of imbue the relationship with a authenticity and a sincerity that just sort of came naturally.
Yeah. And speaking to kind of what we were talking about earlier, this was that first impetus moment for her to let a guard down that she's had up as armor for a very long time. And, it's she's how unnerving that beat is of hearing snips and hearing, this voice that she hasn't heard in so long. And it just cracks her open. And I think that was really fun to explore and get a chance to that really is the only person, the only relationship that could possibly do that. You see her with Boba Fett, with Luke, and you see, these different moments of what, coming across Grogu, and like the revelation and the energy of being able to meet another Yoda-like figure, but she still is very contained and reserved still at that point in her life. And it's only in this moment that some other part starts to appear and show up. And I loved that opportunity to, let this character be different than we've been, for folks who maybe had not seen the animation, that this was the moment that they would get to kind of see this other side of her shine through, that she couldn't help herself. She's telling him immediately, I'm not going to fight you, all these different things, but she can't control it. And that's the first time you've seen her a little bit out of control. And that's actually quite exciting. And it was really fun and really amazing to do.
Yeah. That episode in particular goes back to a lot of moments that were seen in the prequel trilogy, in the animated series, And Dave, I have to imagine that must have been a complicated game to play, because there's going to be two sets of viewers, right, who come into this, people who have digested all of those series and folks who didn't watch the animation. So how did you kind of approach the storytelling here to satisfy both of those sets of viewers?
I think the interesting thing is, well, for me, the challenge of it was fine, because when you look at A New Hope, it is episode 4. You are jumping right into the middle of the story. You don't know Obi-Wan Kenobi or Darth Vader. You don't know any of these relationships, but it's powerful because of the performance, because of the way George keeps everything moving. And so I really looked at that structure and what he had achieved there and tried to kind of follow similar notes. You know enough about this loner walking, finding these artifacts, that there's bad things happening and that she's really kind of up against it, and that the person that can help her the most is someone from her past, Sabine, and that it's not great. And rather than explaining all of that, Natasha and Rosario play it out really wonderfully in their tension between the two of them. They want to work together, but it's not an easy relationship. It's, like a mom and her adopted daughter, like all the history that Sabine had outside of being her apprentice with her own family, and so her blood relative family, and now this relationship with Ahsoka. It's all challenging. So you just try to relate to people on those personal relationships and situations and trials that anyone would have. And that's mostly what I think Rosario and I would talk about when we're talking about the character, not even like Jedi Knights or Force or stuff like that, only when that's necessary. The fans, that know all this stuff, I don't worry about them as much because they know it and they hold me to it anyway. So they're they're the measure. I get the lightsabers right. I make sure the costumes are going to line up. You know, I trust the actors that they are imbuing this with all the sense of history, because they're also, for me, they're so good. And so I have a lightness about that, because when I see them, I see the history and I feel it. And I just think, okay, so if I do, I bet the audience will. So it maybe not as tactical as people think. And I'm worried about the story I'm telling right now. Will you understand it now? And then is it contradicting anything I did before? I usually look at that later. But in the moment, especially writing, I worry about the emotion that's driving it now, the honesty of that. And it's weird things would be beneficial. Like when I first someone told me what Rosario Dawson was, she's interested in playing Ahsoka. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting. I wonder how that would work. And I looked at Rosario, and I'm like, well, yeah, she does look kind of like Ahsoka. And then inexplicably, there's a picture of her with Hayden Christensen online hugging when they're young, and it looks just like Anakin and Ahsoka. And I'm like, well, what in the world? Like, I guess that this isn't even a choice. I guess she is the thing. It just, so you don't argue with those. When the Force is telling you to go a certain way, you don't argue with it, and you trust the people that the Force presents you with, and tackle it that way. I hope that answers the question, but yeah, it's maybe not as tactical as people think. Really just worried about the story right in front of me. And I've been that way ever since Clone Wars. Like, do you really have to watch Attack the Clones to understand that story? Do you really have to watch Phantom Menace? Do you have to know those things? Or is the adventure of it, is the pool of the characters enough that, they're interesting? And so that's kind of the way I went about it strategically.
There was a moment in this place where they reunite in that episode that kind of speaks to something I've noticed about a lot of your Star Wars storytelling, is that when Anakin brings her back in time to the battle, she's her younger self is really struggling with being a warrior, a soldier. And you see that's kind of like a trauma point for her that lasts through adulthood. With Anakin, you see him start the rage, and that warrior starts to take over. Why has that always been a compelling story point for you? This, the peacemaker Jedis who are kind of forced into being soldiers.
I think it's just because taking it out of that fantasy realm for a moment, it's very honest to our world. We want to do good things. We want to be good people. We want to have a good day. The Jedi are trying to do the right thing, and they get sucked into this world where they have to be soldiers and fight a war, which means people are going to die, which the lines get gray really quickly. It's not, things aren't so simple. A lot of these planets left the Republic for the right reason. It's a complicated war designed intentionally by a villain they don't see to compromise them. And I think for Anakin and Ahsoka, they they're desperately trying to get to the right thing, to do good, but it's very hard when you're answering that with a sword. And it's even harder to say, but the real answer here maybe is to walk away from that. How do you do that when evil and bad people are just forcing your hand into violence? And so, I still liken it all the way back to, I take it into being a kid liking Star Wars and thinking, so you're on the playground and you're getting bullied. What do you do? It's a choice to stand up for yourself. It's a choice to cause a fight. It's a choice to walk away. All of those have consequences, some good, some bad. Um, and so I'm trying to present these things in this fantastical way that we're in this battle, and Ahsoka's reminding herself when she was young what she was up against. She doesn't give herself often credit for being able to handle it. And she is able to handle it. And she's able to be effective and to be a help. But it's obviously also colored her world because the vast majority of her life, she has answered problems by turning on a lightsaber. And that's what I find really interesting about her. She is unintentionally, as many Jedi were at the time, raised as a warrior, raised through a means of active, attacking to solve problems. I don't know that the Jedi of the prequels understood that the Force is used for knowledge and defense, never attack. I think it's something that grows out of them experiencing a conflict, and Yoda understands later that maybe that wasn't the right way, but they didn't know what way to go. And so, you're always trying to reinforce good choices, better choices, and get to that. And hopefully, I'm not done with her story yet. Not per long shot. So there's more to do in your question. There's more to answer for her as she looks at what kind of person she is. Even though she's rectified things with Anakin, it doesn't mean she's complete. There always has to be challenges there and conflict. It just means that she settled her past a bit. She's confident in that, but now there's the uncertain future. And how do you proactively deal with the crisis at hand, which will be, we've drifted into the future. So I'm going to stop answering the question before
Well, we see, both of them kind of reconcile with that in the moments right after that, when which is one of the most epic moments, I think, in any Star Wars, when we see Anakin come in, there's a flash of Vader, and he says, "You lack conviction." And then, Rosario, you have to choose, not to fight, to live. Can you walk us through what filming that moment was like? Was it as epic as it looked for us?
I mean, I'm going to speak on behalf of the entire crew. Literally, there were people in tears, like, just to be honest. Like, it was, you talk to a lot of people, on our set, and a lot of them decided to even be in filmmaking because of seeing an old VHS of the making of Star Wars when they were a kid. And so to see that moment and, this shifting and this sort of marriage between these films and the animation and now these shows, and like, it's so powerful, to be haunted by things in your past, and to also get another opportunity to to fight with them, to kind of interact with them, to engage with it, and maybe make a different choice. Actually, one of my favorite beats in it is when she does disarm him, and she's got the saber up to him, and it's in that moment. I mean, she didn't want to fight this person, and going through that memory, that experience of being so young in such a scary time in her life, and now have this choice to make. And there's this beautiful moment, and I remember seeing the fans even grappling with it, like, does her eyes turn red? Is it like just a reflection in her, in the contacts, like, what is it? But it is a real genuine beat. of this fine line that she's walking in that moment. And all of the, she was resisting it throughout this entire episode, throughout this entire fight. She's still grappling with so much, but in that moment, in the heat of the moment, that's really, the defining, what kind of can define you for yourself, and what I love is that it's just a moment, again, and she chooses beyond it, but doesn't mean she won't get challenged again. And that's something that is so beautiful within that dialogue of all of, that whole interaction is, do you see him just for the darkness that he went towards, or do you allow him and the breadth of his entire experience and who he's been all together, and therefore accepting that in yourself, the full breadth of you. And so I think it's just, on two sides, like for the character and what that was so profound. But as a fangirl, like, I have so much it was like illegal to be taking pictures and video, but I have so many
You did
pictures
anyway.
and video, because it was just like, I'm Dave, I don't know what to tell you. Like, it is what it is. I mean, it was magical. It was powerful. It was pinch me kind of moments, and times where I had to be like, oh, I have to raise my saber. Like, he's coming at me hard, but I'm just in awe. Like, it was really exciting and special. And the little girl in me was just beside myself to be there.
It was a cool moment for sure. Yeah, no, I loved that visual, and it's kudos to you, Dave, for your vision, and that flash of Vader, and I love the way you cut it together, and I love the line. It was just a really fun line to say, and effectively it's just sort of a very Vader way of saying, you got to get out of this rut. You got to figure out what it is you want to do and do it. And that's his sort of most direct point in the lesson. And but yeah, so much fun to get to do, and I was so thrilled with how it came out.
Yeah,
I got to
didn't
be
wanna
on set.
overuse the-
Sorry.
I didn't want to overuse the Vader image, right?
Yeah.
And I wanted kids to understand that you are that thing, though, that the power, the choice to be that evil person was in you.
Yeah.
And so when Anakin comes forward, we see the flash of it, but that's what's inside you. And I know how powerfully you can portray that power to instigate her. We could scare everybody if it was Darth Vader up there swinging, but I think it's even more scary to see that it is this friend of hers, this brother of hers that's ready to kill her. Those are moments of clarity, and you go, well, maybe she's justified, right? Is the right thing to do to take your head off there? Probably not. It's like, I love that moment when you Hayden, take off Dooku's head. Your immediate response is, I shouldn't have done that. And how often we do something wrong, we immediately realize that was wrong. And
Right.
it hits us in the cold feeling, right? So those are the things. But like, everybody talks about the Vader flash, which is cool. But I think what's really cool is you coming at her full steam, rolling your shoulder, like ready to go.
Well, that was what's so cool about it. So I was doing the shoulder roll. The shoulder roll is sort of an homage to Anakin, and right before
Yeah.
the Obi-Wan fight, where he's
Yeah.
kind of like psyching himself up. But the way you cut it together, it kind of felt like he was sort of shrugging off the Vader persona in a
Yeah.
way too, which was really, really clever.
Yeah. I was gonna say, I got to be on set when they were shooting the Clone Wars scene, and it was so we we kept watching just on the monitor, blown away that this was before all the special effects could even be put on it, and it was just that beat of the smoke, and you're so disoriented, you don't know where you are. She's just fallen, and you're just fully getting that she's young Ahsoka. And then, the clones are starting to come through in it, and you realize where you are in the midst of this war. And there's this flash of him coming forward in the saber. And it's just this reveal. And I kept loving how many reveals were in that whole sequence. You know what I mean? And I think it speaks to just the fullness of all of us, that how we can appear in moments, and the choices that we make in all of them.
Well, that fullness, I mean, we've been talking about really intimate character moments as well as really grand spectacle moments. What is it about this type of storytelling, this kind of science fiction storytelling, that keeps dragging you back, that really enchants you?
Is that for all of us?
All of us. I'd love to hear from you.
No, Star Wars isn't anything universe. You can tell any kind of story in it. And I learned that from George firsthand on Clone Wars. We told so many types of stories. It wasn't just one thing. And he really, you made it so flexible. It can encompass almost anything. And so here I am almost 20 years in, still having a great time sending characters into this galaxy, because you can literally just come up with something and go there and imagine it and make something of wonder. I mean, everyone like I remember telling Jon Favreau, it was so funny, the space whales are going to be in Ahsoka, and he's like, that is so bizarre. And then he loved it. Like, he thought it was just the most wonderful thing. And it's the fact that in a show like that, in a story like Star Wars, you can have a person standing on the wing of an airplane high in the clouds talking to a giant space whale and make it an emotional moment. And to me, that's adventure. That's, your childhood belief in anything is possible. That, when I watched Jason and the Argonauts as a kid, I believed those magic things were just, on an island somewhere out there, that it was just outside of what I knew. I always used to think of how Frodo and Bilbo would step outside their house, and that path outside their house walked all the way to Mordor, if you wanted to somewhere terrible, but also somewhere good. And that idea of how it connected your world, and that the adventure is right out there. And Star Wars has that, and except it's galactic and intergalactic now. It's, so it's endless creativity. And as long as you remember that that's all the environment and the backdrop, that's all the spectacle, but that the characters work and that they're relatable because they go through all the same things we do, that is where the power of it is. That's where its relatability is. That's where you see yourself, you see your friends, your family in those characters. When you look at your dog and you realize that, oh gosh, it is just like Chewbacca sitting in the front seat. It's far, far away, but it's oh so close, Star Wars, and it's so tangible. That's the wonderful thing about it. And everybody can go there and have a character and be a character. Not just at Disney parks where you can literally do that, but now, which is also, by the way, amazing. Like kids must have it so made today that they can do that and see a loth cat. And by the way, I put loth cats in Star Wars simply because why not? Like, why wouldn't there? I have come so close to just putting straight up a dog on the bridge of a Republic ship, because I'm like, why not? I think dogs are universal. I think if it would just be sitting there, I almost use my dog, but he's terrible at continuity for takes. So I just couldn't have him do it. But a dog sitting on a bridge of a starship would make sense to me. And so I don't even think it needs to look weird. Everybody loves dogs, right? So
Everyone loves dogs. Can't go wrong with a dog. But yeah, I completely agree with all of that. I mean, I think Star Wars is so sort of pervasive because well, one, it's sort of the purest form of entertainment escapism. You're literally transported to a different galaxy, and you get to go on this great adventure with these characters. But at its core, it's also sort of a very sort of straightforward morality tale, and it has to be something where we can kind of learn something about ourselves and about, the world around us, and how we can sort of carve our own path. And it's not messaging. It's just sort of very powerful themes that resonate sort of, across all cultures and languages. It's sort of tapping into those sort of fundamental sort of human emotions and experiences.
I was so blown away that we got to have that text, scrawl like in the very beginning of our show, connecting to those films that I loved. Because for me, it was that bedtime story. Like you're sitting down and you're like getting cozy with your favorite book. And I was such a book nerd when I was a kid. I'd ride my bike peripherally watching where I needed to be, because I'd be like, I need to finish this book. Like I always thought that was just so amazing, that between these, two sleeves, that you could open it up and literally just be transported somewhere and go on this adventure and this journey and fall in love with these characters that feel so real to you. And that just like that beginning of like, you're just being launched right in the middle of this whole situation, and it's you are almost already assuming like you're with me, you're like you've started watching this, so you're on this journey with us. And I think that's probably one of my favorite things, is just that like it starts with the word, and then it gives you those visuals, but you get to kind of continue expanding it now, not just beyond the films, but in the animation, and now in these shows. And you can't get enough of it. Like, I love what a great moment we are in for Star Wars, from Skeleton Crew to Andor, and all these different perspectives of this world. Like, it's so robust and full. And we're in a world now where people are used to playing open world games, where you don't have to just follow the one way through, but like you can meander and go on those side quests. And it just feels so exciting that in this world that you love so much, that you get to keep exploring it, but not necessarily just rewatching it, but looking at it from another perspective and angle. And it just shows like just the vision that George had. I mean, I think about that all the time. You could go anywhere in the world and do the lightsaber sound, or or like Chewbacca, and like you're right there with you, like, and it connects you beyond language and culture and age. It really is just something that is so uniting, and that is just so special to me to enjoy and indulge in, but also to be a part of now. Like, it's magical. It's truly magical.
That was a magical Chewbacca.
Yeah.
By
It really was. I'm glad we got that in there.
Thank you. I have to say also, if you can look it up online, there's a version of Chewbacca, but like if it was voiced by Arnold Schwarzenegger, and it's hilarious. You gotta watch.
Well, Rosario, Hayden, Dave, thank you so much for joining me. I can't wait to see where these characters go next, and I'll keep an eye out for Star Wars dogs. So thank you all for sitting down
Yeah,
with
it
me
probably
today.
won't happen, but I love that. Like, the wolves are probably the closest you'll get that we had. The big howlers, so they were fun.
Yeah.
I tend to make them a lot larger than normal dogs anyways. All right.
Thank you so
Bye-bye.
much, everyone.
Yeah,
Thank
thank you
you.
so much.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Sam.